From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Carr Night Show, inviting you to join Nolan and his guest this week, Gene Valicenti, to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the program. Hopefully you've enjoyed the last few episodes of the show. I certainly have, and hopefully you are as well. Of course, if you enjoyed the last few episodes, as they always say, like, comment, share, subscribe, all the fun stuff to keep the algorithm going up, because they say to do that in order to continue to grow the show. Excuse me. If you like the show and you want more news and updates, follow on social media, Twitter, Nolan Carr at Night, and Instagram, Nolan Carr at Night Show for more updates regarding the program. Nevertheless, on to the main show with my guest this week. Originating from the land of the boss, my guest this week has put his rightful stamp as the epitome of respectful and reputable reporting, which is all about. Whether it's his experience as the captain of COT and CNC Soda constituency, sharing bonhomie early in the morning between himself and you, the listener, or showcasing that $1 million smile wrapped in that Armani-esque suit, Gene has been the cornerstone of showcasing the highlights and lowlights in the tri-state area in southern New England for the last 30 plus years, even if it might get in the way of his days of our lives viewing. Mr. Valicenti, it's both an honor and pleasure to speak with you this fine morning. How are you?
I'm good, Nolan. Thanks for inviting me. That's quite the curtain you have. Is that the show curtain?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I was speaking to Kim Kalunian from WPIX 12 a few weeks ago, and our husband messaged me on Twitter and said the exact same thing as he was watching the first few episodes. So I said, that's better than what my room looks like some days. So I said, might as well do that.
Yeah, that's a famous curtain. I think that's in the Smithsonian, if I'm not mistaken. That was the old Tonight Show, Johnny Carson curtain. So great to be with you. You listen to my show.
Yeah.
Because you pulled off a couple of points, I can tell.
Yeah, I do my best, and I know carpooling with Ben that you did a while ago, a few years ago. You did the 100th episode with him. I checked that out just for a few things, but there'll be a few other more nuggets and Easter eggs in this that I tuned into after doing my expert research as much as you have.
Okay.
Speaking of your radio show, which you just did this morning from 6 to 9, and you have the later shows today, what is your decompressed time like in a day like this before you go on the news, or is it just a complete cruise control the last 10 years since you've done the radio as well?
Well, let's see. You and I are talking at 10:08 in the morning. So I've been off the air for an hour. So I get up like 4:30 in the morning and start my radio show at 6 o'clock in the morning. So because it's such an early morning show, most of the prep work has been done the night before.
Yeah.
Because we can't start calling up people to be a guest at 6:30 in the morning. It doesn't always go over so well when we ring their phone that early. So a lot of the work has been done before. So there's 8-9 hours of prep work that's been put into the show. And then 6 o'clock rolls along, and we'll start fresh, see what happened overnight. And once the show starts, it starts. And when it's over at 9 o'clock, and I can come back and catch up with some errands or appointments, record your show. And then I start to get a little tired around, I don't know, it depends, either 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock, either before lunch or after lunch. I'll take a quick nap and then, start to prep for tomorrow's radio show, see what's going on at Channel 10, because I also anchor the news there at 6 o'clock at night. So there's some prep work to do there. So in between, there's a little nap. And then I get over to Channel 10, 4:30, 5 o'clock, do the 6 o'clock news. And then I'm home by 7, eat a little dinner, and I'm in bed by 9. So it's a pretty routine day every day.
Yeah.
But you have to have kind of a schedule of checklist things. Otherwise, you can't really do both things. So it's worked out so far. So a long answer to a short question. That's my day.
Well, now you're probably so used to after the last 10 years of doing the weekly radio. I want to sort of start and continue to discussing your radio before, but I'd like to go back to the days of scaring your brother Anthony with your rendition of Claude Rains's The Invisible Man, and your dog Mike butting you, and a few other things. Growing up, of course, most people, when they have success like yourself, they know at some point that they have a skill or trait of doing that thing that they do professionally so
Right.
well at some point. So for you, maybe not necessarily reporting in journalism, but telling stories and showcasing stuff from that perspective, when did you realize that you sort of had a skill to do that?
Well, I guess I've always been a storyteller, a natural storyteller. That probably comes from my grandmother on my father's side. I grew up in her house in New Jersey, in Weehawken, New Jersey, just outside the Lincoln Tunnel up on the cliffs overlooking Manhattan. And my grandparents were in the house on the second floor. We lived on the first floor. I had an aunt and uncle who also lived upstairs with them. So I had a lot of storytellers around me who were very good at making people laugh. And so that's kind of how I grew up. Most of that kind of living, I think, is gone.
Yeah.
I moved out, moved one, two, three states away. But I'm still close to my brother Anthony, and I bring him up on occasion because we had fun growing up. And in fact, he was just up with me over the weekend. We spent Saturday and Sunday at the Audrey Car Show, and so many listeners were coming up, and they know Anthony, and they were as happy to meet him as they were to meet me, because they've heard me tell stories about me and my brother fighting and growing up and doing all kinds of shenanigans and getting in all kinds of trouble, and Mike the dog.
Yeah.
So people love when I tell those stories. I guess it just kind of connect. They can connect.
Sure.
Everybody's got a family story, and maybe I just have a talent for telling them that makes them entertaining. But I have to say, my brother was he was sought after at the car show by listeners who kept coming up to me and saying hello.
Well, he probably didn't expect to be a celebrity at this point in his life due to his brother. I want to also ask you this. Of course, you use it to an extent. Work, I'm sure, makes you use it in some avenues. Social media. My generation has grown up with it, and it's unfortunately part of our lives forever. Although you didn't have that back when you were at Fairleigh Dickinson University in your
Right.
college days, I'm curious how you, besides maybe the newspaper at a school or something of that nature, got your experience or your feet wet besides working at WPIX near the end of your school experience.
Sure. Well, I remember in elementary school, must have been first or second grade, we had a little school newspaper, and it was actually just run off a copy machine. I think they called them mimeograph machines then. They were messy and ink was all over the place, but they would spit it out 30 pages, and the kids would write essays and things like that. And I remember taking part in that. And then I remember taking part in the eighth grade newspaper, the Wilson Wigwam, I think it was called. And my high school paper was called the Indian Ink in Weehawken. So I think I was the news editor of that paper. And I early on I knew I wanted to get in television because I would just watch a lot of television, and I would watch the great anchormen in New York. And I said that's for me. I want to do that. And so when an opportunity came up to get into TV while I was still in college, I think I was a junior in college when Channel 11 in New York opened up a bureau on our campus. They wanted to cover more New Jersey news, so they rented a classroom or class space in New Jersey, and I was the kid who got the job. That was kind of my entree into the business, and it was a different business back then. There were more people working in it. There was two-man crews and three-man crews, and over time, technology has also supplanted that and replaced most of that. Now we have reporters running around with their own cameras.
Sure.
But that's kind of how I broke into the business. I knew I always wanted to do it from a very young age. I always wanted to be on television, wanted to be an anchorman, and got my first chance in the business in 1981 while I was still in college. And then I was working for Channel 11 part time as a college kid. And then when I graduated, they hired me full time
Sure.
to run that New Jersey office. So that was the first a couple of baby steps.
Well, I wanted to mention that. I mean, most kids in college, as you well know, at NBC 10 and all the other stations, are interning at some point in their junior, senior years at a station or
Yeah.
multiple stations, whereas you got a job working at a station right in college. So how much of that was you just being so much more hungry to get into the business than other kids your age going through the program at school?
It was a lot of it. I found out about this early on that they were going to open an office, and I really pursued it. And I went over to Channel 11, and I just kind of wrestled my way in the door. And I got this thing. It was just an assistant in their New Jersey bureau, and it was paid. I actually quit a job I had at the shoe store, paying a lot more money. So I took a pay cut to go to work for Channel 11. But once I got there, it was a small office. It was covering New Jersey, and they kind of just had me doing everything. They just threw me in, and that was next thing you know, I was writing news, and we were recording a little segment in the office. I wasn't on TV, but I was sitting behind
Yeah.
the reporter who was on TV. I have some video that's pretty funny. And then from there, I parlayed that into a job at New Jersey Public Television. And then from there, I went to Connecticut, uh, two stations in Connecticut, and then I came to Channel 10. But I have to tell you, along the way, there were a lot of bumps in the roads.
Sure.
Yeah, in the road. I would quit a job, got laid off for a job, got fired from a job. And when I got to Channel 26 in Connecticut, I thought everything was going great because I was anchoring a 10 o'clock newscast. And I was really happy. I was an anchor and I was about 29, 30 years old. And this was great. And then all of a sudden, another bump in the road in the form of the owner of the station didn't want to do a newscast anymore. He thought he could make more money running the Juice Man, some infomercials. So I was out of work again. So at that point, our first child was on the way, and I was going to get out of the business. I was totally going to get out and go to work back in New Jersey for AT&T. I'd taken the test to work for AT&T. I was on the short list to get hired, and I was just waiting for the call. When I got a call out of the blue from Channel 10 in Providence, I had never applied to Channel 10.
Yeah.
But my work, a clip of my work turned up on somebody else's reel.
Yeah.
And the news director liked it and called me and said, would you come up for an interview? And I said, well, I'll just give it one last shot because I've got the job already at AT&T. I'm getting out. So I went for the interview, and the then news director, Ted Canova, kept me waiting for the interview. It was 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And I made a mental note that if he keeps me waiting another 5 minutes, I'm just going to leave this place and walk out.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting out of television. And sure enough, with about 90 seconds to spare, he came, bolting out of the door and said, come on up. I'm sorry, we got jammed up. And I went up. And it sounds cliche, but the rest is history. But for those 90 seconds, you and I would not be sitting here. I don't know where I'd be.
Sure.
A totally different life path.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes how things happen.
Well, I want to talk about that because it's just fascinating. Of course, you were able to experience the situation of broadcast media where there's a lot of turnover in the business, and NBC 10 is no stranger to that the last few years, of course. But you experienced that going to different station, and then that whole scenario when I tuned into that through the PBS Day in the Life documentary they made on you, talking about Betty Jo Cugini, whose father saw you on his TV and said that was great. And then he said, hire that person, and they got in contact with you. And then Ted's keeping you waiting for minutes on minutes, and you're about to leave. And that scenario, I mean, you kind of mentioned it. You were so close. 2.5 minutes later, you would have left. Yeah. For you, though, to showcase, though, that you stayed, you took that gamble and waited, and they finally brought you up and hired you. At that moment, was that sort of the moment you realized that you are journalism in the sense that this is what you're going to be doing? You truly love it regardless of what happens?
Probably, although I have to tell you, I was pretty dejected at the time.
Sure.
When you're in journalism, you're on television, your face and you're the product. It's not like you're working for a company and widgets didn't sell this year, we'll just get another widget, or that style shirt didn't sell. It's you. So you have to have a really thick skin and be able to accept rejection. And I mean, I took my fair share of rejection. Maybe some smarter people would have bailed out a lot earlier than I did, but I was pretty stubborn. But I was really on the edge. Another 90 seconds, 2 minutes, I would have left. But who knows? Maybe if I left and went back to work for AT&T, I might have got back into business.
Sure.
Maybe I would have said, this is not for me. I really want to take another chance. But I stayed with it. And sure enough, Channel 10 was the right spot for me. Because when I got here, I didn't know if I'd be here 10 weeks or 10 months. And turns out 31 years at the same station, which is very unusual. But they liked me. They wanted to keep me. They kept making it attractive for me to stay. We had a family, and it was time to put some roots down. So that's why I'm still in Rhode Island. And then the radio thing was a whole other dynamic. So it's worked out for me. Yeah. I mean, when I meet a young person, my advice is always, well, take a shot.
Yeah.
Just take a shot. It may not work out. Sometimes things in life don't work out, but you certainly owe it to yourself to take a shot. And if you're stubborn enough and persistent enough, it might work out in your favor. So, yeah, I'm glad I stayed.
Sure,
I'm glad I answered that call. And by the way, how about this for luck? I'm glad that Betty Jo's father passed the TV while she was looking at me, because she wasn't crazy about me.
Yeah.
She really didn't think I was right for Channel 10, and there were other candidates. But can you imagine if her father hadn't been with her in the room, kind of just passing that tape machine? I don't know where I'd be.
Or just say, get that mustache man out of here.
Yeah.
I don't want to see him. I don't think he's all that. I want to ask you this. When you got there, I'm sure you were told about NBC 10 at the time and what the station was like and who the longtime anchors were like and so forth. For you, compared to maybe 31 years later now, in terms of how different that viewpoint and goal is, what did you want to bring to the station that you realized might not have been there when you first started?
Well, I wanted to keep the job because I had been, through.
Yeah, that's kind of ideal.
I was happy to have a job. I wanted to do whatever it took to keep it. And at the time, Ted Canova, our news director, wanted a reporter who was going to be aggressive and conversational and kind of, break out of the box. At the time, the 11 o'clock news was in a very tough race with Channel 12. It was the closest Channel 12 has ever come to overtaking Channel 10, 31 years ago. And so the stakes were high, and this then news director wanted somebody who was going to be able to go out and kind of grab the town by the jugular and let's go. And that was me. And so I knew what my mission was. I knew what he wanted, and I was going to deliver. So I had my trench coat and my mustache, and I was very aggressive, chasing down politicians and running up and down the courthouse steps. And the mustache kind of got me known right away. I don't think anybody else had a mustache in town, but I did. And so people within like 2 weeks of me being on the air, I think conversations in the homes around Rhode Island were, did you see what that guy with the mustache did tonight? So so I had the mustache for about 3 or 4 years, and then I just decided to shave it off one day. But people still remember it,
Sure.
talk to me about it, and ask me when I'm going to bring it back. So yeah, that those were the early days.
I wanted to mention, of course, with longevity occasionally comes. Actually, no, I'll get to the question. During my podcast, I've been able to speak to people who, from your station, particularly at Dan Jennings, Emily Voles, I just spoke to a few others across the state as well, and people who've been at this at a station or this station for a few years. One of the people who probably went from having people when you joined, been there for a long time, to them becoming those who are the standard bearers and those who help carry the station. What does it mean to you to be one of those standard bearers of the station who've been there for many years, like Patrice Wood, yourself, Frank Cletta, and those guys over the years?
Yeah, well, when I came, there were plenty of standard bearers. There was Doug White, Gary Lay, Frank was there, Art Lake was there, the standard bearer of all standard bearers. Art Lake was there. I worked with him for many years. So Channel 10 has always been kind of a legacy station that likes to keep its sort of main anchors, its main pillars. Now we swap out people all the time in and around. Some people come, they don't work out. Others come, they work out great, but they want to go somewhere else. But Channel 10 is a station that kind of keeps those main pillars, the main anchors in place. So I took Doug's place, and I've been there for a long, long time, 31 years. I think Doug was there maybe close to 40 years. Patrice has been there with Doug and with me. Frank Carpano was there when I got there. Frank's still, one of our pillars. Mark Searles has become, kind of a steady rock. So that's kind of been the thing that helps Channel 10, I think, is that we keep people who connect with the audience and they make it attractive to stay.
Sure.
So that you're not saying I've got to run out of here and go to Boston to make the kind of money I need. Channel 10 will make it attractive for you to stay if they think they need you to stay to keep the station's legacy going. So in many ways, it's a unique situation over at Channel 10.
Well, I think also for a household like mine who are big time supporters of NBC 10, of course, and you look at the station, and from when I grew up to then now, there's still some of the same faces there, and it makes it comfortable. It's like, oh, that person is still there. That I can trust that person with showcasing news, regardless of the level of it. With long-term success that you've had comes, as I just said, success and award-winning and recognition of that sort of stuff. And recently, of course, the Radio and Television Hall of Fame that you just got inducted to, which congratulations on that as well. Of course, at the beginning of your career, you're not trying to win awards. You're not trying to win 5 Emmys or an Edward R. Murrow Award or get inducted into several Hall of Fames. For you, the hard work that you've put in, not just on a regular basis, but the stuff you've gone through your career, to be in a scenario where you win 5 Emmys, you win an Edward R. Murrow Award, you get inducted into Hall of Fame. What does that mean to you?
Well, I guess, listen, I'm glad I stuck it out. I'm proud of myself for sticking it out, putting in the hard work. I mean, I still work hard every day. I read every script. I don't know if the PBS show really does showcase what I do every day.
Yeah.
It's a lot of prep work. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of knowing the news you're talking about. I mean, with the radio, it's 3 hours of a microphone that you have to fill. You better know what you're talking about, or the audience is going to pick up that you don't. And when I go into Channel 10, I read every script. I rewrite most of them just because I think that's what a journalist has to do, so that I know that news that I'm reading, and it sounds like I'm the guy who wrote the story. I mean, I don't have to. We have a staff of very talented writers and producers who put the whole show together, and it would be very easy for me to just come in and pick up a script and just sit in front of the camera and do that. I can do that by now because I've been doing it so long. I could fake it, so to speak. I could read a show cold, or I could, put the time in and look at every script and rewrite it and make sure it's 100% and fact check. And so that's what I do. And I think it shows. I think the audience, the audience has to like you, number one.
Yeah.
And after they like you, they'll build up a level of trust, and then you become kind of a welcome fixture. And then the awards come later in life. When you're young, of course, you'd love to win an Emmy. I didn't win an Emmy for a long, long time. I would go up to Boston every year, maybe 8, 9 years in a row, wouldn't win anything. And then when I actually won one, it was the big. No one was more surprised than me. Honestly, that is true. My wife will tell you that we go up to the Emmys every year and wouldn't win. And the year I won, I think they had to shake me out of my chair. I couldn't believe I won. And then the other award, the Edward R. Murrow, it's nice to have that. That's a prestigious award. Got a couple of those. And then the Hall of Fames have come recently. So all in all, look, the awards come after you put the hard work in.
Sure.
But the hard work has to be daily. There's no slacking. There's no sitting on your laurels, so to speak. You can't. I guess not. In the business I'm in, I mean, that radio show has to be so fine-tuned.
Sure.
You can't mail it in, because it'd be a lot of postage to mail in 3 hours.
Yeah.
You can't mail it in. You got to know it. You got to work at it. You have to keep it fresh. It has to be witty and funny and entertaining. And then the TV at night, it just has to be where it is, or you'll lose the audience. So.
Well, you also with both things, technology is so advancing at a quick pace, and your old colleague Frank Coletta was not a fan of the technology. So for you, I'm sure you've had to learn all this stuff where someone from my generation could come in and they zoom right through, and you're still chugging along saying, this old dog can still hunt. Speaking of radio, when you're at your night shift at the station in Cranston, you're on for a few morning hours, spreading your voice across those airways the last 10 years with WPRO. Although you're the unconfirmed Tom Tucker, you've become the voice of Rhode Island radio. At the beginning of this time doing this show for WPRO, what was it like in terms of taking over for the likes of Salty Brine and Mary Sorrentino?
Well, I had no designs on doing radio until about, let me say more than 20 years ago. I would fill in occasionally for Mary Ann Sorrentino. And that was only a lark. They would call me up and ask me to fill in, and I'd say, sure. I thought it was fun, take calls, talk to the people. But when I started doing that, the station got tremendous reaction. People just liked me on the radio. I don't know, maybe it's my storytelling ability, or they thought I was funny. But I would just do a fill-in, and then about 13, 14 years ago, Paul Giammarco, who was the then program director, said, would you consider doing this, more? Would you do a regular show? And I was like, well, I'm doing TV. I'm kind of busy. And he said, well, how about a weekend show? This was 2010. And I said, oh, well, I'll give it a shot. So I did a weekend show, and it was very popular. Ratings were great. People loved it. And that went on for about 2.5, 3 years. And then they came and said to me, would you do the morning show? So I was like, well, that's a different commitment altogether. That means getting up 4:30. That means 5 days a week. That means changing my schedule at Channel 10 to accommodate it. But I like doing radio so much that I did. And I was able to work out a deal with Channel 10 and WPRO to do both things and work my schedule out. And so I really love doing radio. I mean, I get up in the morning. I can't wait to get on the radio because it's a lot of fun.
Sure.
Radio is a different thing than television. Television, they give me a script and we kind of read the stories one after another. Radio is totally different. Radio, we ad lib, and it's news commentary and analysis. You generally know what I'm thinking about a story. Yeah. I take calls. We have a lot of fun. It's been a whole other dynamic. I wish I would have started doing radio earlier in life. I wish I didn't do it so long. But it's been great. It's been rewarding, and the show is number one. So there you go.
What can you complain about? I'm curious, compared to your first newscast as a journalist at your first station, compared to that moment to your first radio cast as a radio host in 2013 during the weekday stuff, how nervous were you for the radio compared to your first television?
Okay, TV, I'll give you a true story. So television, I was working for New Jersey Network Public Television, covering a big murder trial in Atlantic City. And it was my first reporting job on air, but everything I had done was taped. I'd never done live television. So the day the verdict came in, the television station rented a live truck, a special live truck, so that I could report the verdict live. After all this work, it was that big a story that we wanted to cover it live, which was a rare thing for that particular station. So they rented the truck, and the whole day had gone by. The verdict came in, and I was getting ready and tuning up my script and had my earpiece in, and I was getting ready to go. But keep in mind, I'd never done anything live. So just about 30 seconds before we were going to go live, I started to get really nervous and get stage fright, and I mean really bad, to the point where I was almost blacking out. I could see kind of tunnel vision zooming in, and from my earpiece, I could hear the director tossing to me. I could hear the anchor saying my name, and Gene Valicenti is live, but I was so nervous that it was almost like it was fading out.
Yeah.
I was blacking out. So when they punched me up, I stammered through the introduction. It was terrible. Maybe the worst piece of television anyone has ever done. I was just stuttering and stammering and mixing my words up. It was awful, and it was so bad that the director just punched up my recorded piece rather than staying on me and torturing the audience. And I remember when it was all over, I took my mic off, took my earpiece off, and walked away and thought, well, that's it. I'm finished.
Yeah.
I'll never do my television again. And my brother Anthony was watching it back home in New Jersey, and he basically confirmed for me
Yeah.
that you were terrible. You embarrassed the family, is basically what he said.
Yeah.
I don't have an appetite anymore. You were awful.
Yeah.
So, which I guess was honest criticism. You can always count on your brother to give you the honest word. But then you know what? The next day I went back and it was better.
Yeah.
And by the third or fourth day, it was back. And so, the pattern of my life or my career is just keep trying again,
Sure.
keep knocking on the door. Eventually, it'll open up. So I went back and did another one, and it got better. And then I went to another station, and it got better. And eventually, it ended up at Channel 10.
Now, with unlike television, where you have to do your best to stay sort of unbiased and centrist and in the middle to the best you can, depending on whatever the station feels like, radio, you can be more free and more open and more truthful to yourself. When you first started the weekday show and you're able to be that way and be more lively and colorful and stuff, how rewarding was that for you?
Oh, it felt great. And not only that, the audience liked it. My show is news, commentary, and analysis. Every Sunday show on the networks has a reporters roundtable,
Yeah.
where reporters will share their opinion or views on the news, which is different than the actual report they're producing. So there's nothing new about doing news, commentary, and analysis. I just happen to have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. And I think it's also fair and balanced. We'll rib both sides of the political parties as much as the other. And most of all the politicians come on. Everybody's thinks they've been being treated fairly, which is important to me.
Yeah.
So it's worked out. Yeah, but it was very uh, very rewarding, very refreshing to kind of be able to tell yourself, if I find something funny, the radio audience does too.
Sure.
So it's a completely different act. It's a completely different thing, radio and TV. TV, as you said, get a script. We
Yeah.
stick to the script. We don't deviate much. Radio is completely different. It's ad-libbed,
Sure.
and it allows for news commentary and analysis. So
I was listening maybe over the weekend to your conversation with the RI director on Spotify, because you put some of the stuff on there as well. And what I turned from that, which I'm guessing is probably for the majority of the time you've been doing the show, you get a wide variety of guests to come on to ask questions to whatever person you have on that has some power,
mhm.
that try to get as much out and as many questions, long-winded answer as they can into the answer, where they live and what this is like.
Right.
And for you, I'm sure that was a lot to deal with at first, but now you've been able to sort of circumnavigate that and do with it what you can. And you sort of try to jump in and have them only ask one question,
Yeah.
then let the person answer, and then they try to ask more questions. Dealing with that the first few times as a radio host, how aggravating was that to then now you're able to fully deal with it?
Yeah. Well, it's not. I wouldn't say it's aggravating. Listen, we're limited on time.
Yeah.
The commercials have to run. I only
Yeah.
have a certain amount of time, so we've gotten around now to telling our people who call in for Ask the DOT, just tell us where the problem is.
Yeah.
Unless it's only natural, people don't call into the radio all the time, and sometimes they'll say, "Good morning, how are you?" But then they tell us how they're getting to work,
Yeah.
which is not important. Just tell us where the pothole is so we can get
Yeah.
it patched. But I think the guests have gotten a little better about that, and maybe I've gotten better about telegraphing that. So I want to get as many people on as possible because the idea is to help, constituent service. So if I've got one guy kind of monopolizing a 3 minute build up to the question, it's taking away time from everybody else. And when he just wants his pothole filled, just tell us where it is.
Yeah.
We'll be out there right away and try to do it for you. So that's the mission I've asked the DOT. And that's why we kind of try to rush people along a little bit so we can get as many people on as possible.
Well, that's a scenario where, because then the DOT guy, he always said, "Oh, okay, we'll get my guys out there. We'll get my electrical engineer out there and look at this, and we'll get right on it." And then you have the next person who throws it to an extent. There was a scenario which I kind of found interesting. I won't mention directly because I have a few more questions left. Where you broke a story, one radio broadcast that's in the PBS documentary with some local senator in Providence, and then the late great Bill Rapley ends up breaking the story later on in the story. So that's probably a moment where during your 10-year career doing the radio, you enjoyed to an extent because the attention really is technically on you, not Bill. Of course, you still love what you do, and you won't be locking up the shop anytime soon, and won't be unplugging the lavalier mic from your fancy shirt anytime soon. However, for you, though, if you can make the decision today of either choosing radio or television for the remainder of your career, what would you choose?
For the remainder of my career.
Yeah.
Well, now I have to make a choice. I can't say both. I have to make a choice.
It's either one.
I would probably say radio going forward. Television has been great for me. It was my first thing I've done. I've done it for a long time. But radio is a lot of fun.
Sure.
So I kind of look at the horizon, the back nine, as they say. I might choose radio over television. I mean, as long as they let me stay on television, I'll stay on television. But radio is just a lot of fun because I kind of connect with the audience and talk to people.
Sure.
So maybe radio will be my last flight, as they say.
Sure.
It'll be the radio plane rather than the TV plane.
Well, I want this is the last question I'll ask before this little funny game I have. As I mentioned, not hanging up anytime soon. The lavalier mic's not being pulled off. The TV set's not being shut down. But for Gene Valicenti, the professional legacy as a reporter and journalist and anchor, what do you hope it is at the end of the day for the viewers out there?
Just that I was fair and balanced, and you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
But you have to be fair to Donald Trump as you are to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Or anybody else, and sometimes that's not easy. The country's become very, very polarized.
Yeah.
And there are some people who don't like, if you say something nice about a certain candidate or deride another one, or conversely do the same thing in the opposite fashion. But you've got to live with that. This is the business we've chosen, and you have to have a thick skin. But I hope people say that in the end, well, I hope my radio audience will say they laughed a lot. They had a lot of fun with that guy on the radio. I hope they miss me when it's time to go. And I hope my TV audience and radio too, to some extent, will say that I was fair and balanced.
Sure.
I wasn't afraid to advocate for a controversial person when that person happened to be right, or I wasn't afraid to criticize that person when he happened to be wrong, and that I was fair and balanced, and that they, in the end, if you go back and look at my record, you'd see that.
Well, I think that's a scenario nowadays where, and I'm not obviously not in your field or have the level of experience that you do, but it's a scenario where there are a lot of people or stations in the country, not just local ones, but national ones, where they sort of hide from trying to call both sides out or just go for one side and don't want to share the authentic part about it. Gene, I want to say thank you for doing this. This has been a great treat and real fun for me, but I want to end on this little game called the one word challenge. So what entails is this is I'll throw out a few names of people, places, or things, and you have to do your best to say either a word or two or a sentence that best comes to mind when you hear it.
Okay. All right. I'm game. Go ahead.
First one, New Jersey.
New Jersey, my home, not always covered fairly, beautiful parts, some crappy parts too, but overall a nice state that doesn't get a fair shake.
Cranston.
Cranston, where I work, Garden City, Mayor Hopkins, Top Golf.
Hard work
every day. You can't succeed without it. Keep pushing.
Success.
My daughters, my three daughters.
Well, there you go. Thomas Quinlan.
Tom Quinlan, he's my producer. Funny, character.
And last but certainly not least in this cosmic universe, Gene Valicenti.
Gene Valicenti, tried hard, took a shot,
Yeah,
followed his own advice, took a shot.
he did it
It
his
worked
way.
out.
He did
It
it his
worked
way.
out. Yeah.
Well, Gene, I want to say thank you so much for doing this. It's a true treat, and for somebody who grew up in Rhode Island and someone who experienced this station for so many years to see like yourself and have the opportunity to speak to you. This is a real treat and a moment of my life. So thank you.
Well, great. Good luck with your podcast. I'll be listening.
Oh, I appreciate it. Now, of course, you're on the nightly news shows, and we're talking about the radio. You're also on social media. Where can we find you? Twitter and that sort of stuff.
Well, I have a Twitter account. I mostly consume Twitter. I use it to gather news.
Yeah.
I'm not on Twitter too much, but on Facebook, I'll occasionally post on Facebook. So that's where I am. But I'm everywhere. I'm on the
Yeah.
radio, TV. I'm exposed enough.
Yeah.
You can find me.
Whether you want to be or not, you're out there. People can find you, as they say. Well, if you enjoy us, because who the heck wouldn't down the line when Gene gets inducted into another Hall of Fame, or whatever it may be, you're gonna say, I should have subscribed. So subscribe, comment, share, all that fun jazz. If you want news and updates regarding the show, follow on Twitter, Nolan Carr Night, and Instagram, Nolan Carr at Night Show. And the words of Johnny Carson, the Dean of talk shows like this one, and the background like mine, I bid you all a heartfelt good night.